Think of the setting of your favorite book. If you had to describe that setting in 2 words, what would you say? If you thought about something like spooky woods, quiet room, or charged stadium, you were thinking of the emotional setting as well as the physical one. That emotional component of setting is called atmosphere. Today, I want to talk about how to build atmosphere in creative writing. When you craft a strong atmosphere, you have an emotional effect on your readers. Emotions are memorable. Strong emotions are unforgettable. That's why you need to think about the atmosphere of your story. This is Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers, because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and writer. Let's start by defining atmosphere. Where do you feel comfortable? Where was the last place you felt unsafe? The emotional component of a place like your home or a dark, unknown alley is the atmosphere. Real places have atmosphere just like the settings in your book do. Your reader should be able to feel what that space is like. This feeling is going to keep them engaged and reading. I think atmosphere is best understood through an example. So here is a section of Sea Witch Rising by Sarah Henning that shows atmosphere. The sharpest of things keeps its edge even in the dullest of settings. And so my coral knife shines through the shadows I call home. Rendered ghost white with magic, the serrated blade is sharp enough to cleave a single hair in 2. Beautiful, deadly, perfect. I only hope it's enough for when they arrive. What do you feel after reading this excerpt? Likely you feel a sense of foreboding, that there is danger present, and you're probably rooting for the main character with the knife. The emotions you are feeling are partially due to the atmosphere, the setting with shadows and this deadly knife in it. Here, the setting and object are working together to build the atmosphere. Now, I do want to say atmosphere is somewhat interchangeable with mood when it comes to writing. Technically, atmosphere is the emotion of your setting, and mood is the emotion of your scene. So you can see how those two overlap quite a bit, and you can really use the terms interchangeably. Most people do. They do have a slight technical difference. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the emotion of the setting of your story. That's what atmosphere is. Let's dive right in to how to build atmosphere through description. How you describe your setting plays the biggest role in the atmosphere of your story, and objects are a part of your setting. In Sea Witch Rising, we know that there is danger because the knife is sharp. We know that this story is likely taking place in or near the sea because it is a coral knife and because of the name. And we know that this character holding the knife is not necessarily evil or the villain yet. Because she is worried about defending herself with it, she's not trying to use it for nefarious purposes that we know of. When you're describing objects in your story, especially important ones, think about the emotion you want your readers to associate with that object. Then describe the object using emotionally charged words that are going to share that emotion with your readers, just like Henning did for this coral knife. The same goes for describing your setting itself. If your story takes place in a theater and you want it to feel warm and inviting, you might describe the soft curves of the architecture and the cushiony seats. However, if you want that theater to instead feel dark and foreboding, maybe mysterious, you might describe the way your footsteps echo in the empty halls, or how dim the lighting is. These are ways you can build the atmosphere in your story without having to spend too much time and words on your setting. The atmosphere is one of the reasons why it isn't enough just to state where your story is taking place. I've had authors ask me before, why can't I just say they're in the jungle and leave it at that? Because saying they're in the jungle does not convey the atmosphere of that place. It doesn't tell the reader what they're supposed to feel in that jungle. It also doesn't bring the setting to life. And reading is a form of escape, especially when it comes to fiction or story-based writing. Readers want to feel plunged into that place. They don't want just some cursory mention of where the characters are. So remember to fully describe your settings to give your readers the best experience possible and build your atmosphere. There's one component of description in particular that I want to talk about, and that's how to use the 5 senses to show atmosphere. The way humans experience the world around them is through the 5 senses. That's a key component of your atmosphere when you're describing your setting. What does that space sound like, smell like, feel like, taste like, look like? Now, you don't need to use the 5 senses every time, but you should at least think about them. Here's an example of how you can use the 5 senses not only to describe your setting, but also to build your atmosphere. This is from In the Cover Deep by Brandy Valance. As Bianca looked out from the prayer room, the sea changed from brightest sapphire to a deep, unfathomable ink. Slowly, the room acquiesced to gaslight, a soft flicker here, an amber shadow there. The music swelled, and then the organist lightened his touch, taming the notes, slowing them, bringing tones that were both beautiful and holy. The waves rolled, and the ship gently with it, rocked in the cradle of the deep. This setting from In the Cover Deep has a peaceful atmosphere. Readers can feel what it's like to be there on that ship. They can see the sunset on the ocean waters and hear the organist playing and feel the waves' movement. All of these senses are coming together to build this atmosphere. And something would be lost if the author had stopped at just the sunset, or had only included the music. It's all of these things coming together that really creates that emotion within the reader, that really makes them feel at peace. While sight, what your setting looks like, is important because it is most humans' primary sense, often emotion is tied stronger to our other senses, especially smell. So remember, when you're building atmosphere, sometimes what a place looks like is not going to do it. You need to include some of the other senses to really build that emotion. When describing your setting and building the atmosphere, ask yourself what each of the 5 senses is like there. You don't have to include this in the final description, but you as the author should know. So take a moment and think, what does my main setting look like? What does it sound like? What does it smell like? What might it taste like? And especially, what does it feel like? Often when people describe the emotion of the place, they describe how it feels. Sometimes this is touch, sometimes it's more of the emotional component, but that's something to pay attention to when you are trying to craft your atmosphere. Do they feel comfortable there? Do your characters feel anxious in that space? How do the people who are there feel? That's how you can use the 5 senses to build your atmosphere. Next, I want to share an editor's advice for choosing your atmosphere. When building the atmosphere of your story, think about your genre and your reader's expectations. While every atmospheric moment in your story doesn't need to be tied to this, the overall atmosphere does to a certain extent. There are lots of different kinds of mysteries. A cozy mystery reader is reading for the mystery and the cozy atmosphere. So if your atmosphere swings too far towards suspense and thriller type of mystery, you're going to lose those cozy mystery readers. Some readers read for that emotional component of the setting, even if they don't realize that's what they're looking for. So think about what subgenre your story might fall into and try and heighten that aspect of your atmosphere. Then also think about where the scene you're describing is taking place in your story. If it's at your character's lowest moment, you probably don't want a happy-go-lucky atmosphere. If it's at a moment where your reader and your characters get a breather and finally something works out, you probably don't want the atmosphere to have this really intense feeling of foreboding yet. Now, you might also do the opposite. If you're trying to create something that's ironic or go against the way your character is feeling or acting, you might put the atmosphere at odds with their mood. For example, if you have a grumpy person who is stuck in a bright, happy place, that could be really interesting and create some great opportunities for humor. In that instance, the atmosphere and the character are at odds with one another, but it still works for your book. More often than not, you want them to be in alignment, but it depends on your story. The emotional impact of your story is vital to its success. There's a saying that says people might forget what you say or do, but they will never forget how you made them feel. This is true for books. A reader might forget your character's name, or they might forget what exactly happened, but they're not going to forget the way that book made them feel. And that emotional component might be the reason they recommend it to their friends. That's why you want to think about the atmosphere when you're revising and crafting your stories. So, how do you build atmosphere in your writing? Share it in the comments below. And for more videos on the emotional component of your stories and other aspects of writing, subscribe to Ignited Ink Writing, a channel dedicated to helping authors like you transform your writing so it lingers with your readers, because writing that lingers gets remembered and recommended to others. I'm Caitlin Burvey, editor and writer. To find out more about me, go to www.ignitedinkWriting.com. There you will also find a guide to building strong settings. This will help you craft that atmosphere you're looking for. If you're looking for more examples of atmosphere in writing, consider looking at short stories because you'll get to see more examples faster. I have a short story collection called When Magic Calls that might work for this. And now it's your turn to use description of objects and your setting, especially the five senses, to build the emotional atmosphere of your story and ignite your ink.